'68 I was injured, so I had some time on my hands, so I got started in birds about 1969, and I've been raising rollers ever since. In the early days, I met Charlie Saldana, Bob Scott, George Gulla, fanciers like that. Me and Charlie got started about the same time, so we were partners for many, many years, went many places together, did a lot of things together, spent a lot of time in a lot of backyards learning about rollers. And of course, George Gulla and Bob Scott, both of those guys have been around for a long time. George since passed away, but Bob's still around, and still see those guys from time to time. And really, that's about how I got started. Started with a lot of different kinds of birds, a lot of different strains of birds. Mostly ended up with a lot of Bob Scott birds that were straight Pinson birds, a lot of Smith birds in them, and raised those for the better part of 25 years.
To get into it, Jerry, how do you train your young bird kid? When does it start for you, Jerry?
Well, I like to get started with my young birds as early as possible. I usually put my birds down sometime in February, and this is March 1st, and I've got a couple youngsters in a nest already. So I usually put my birds down about February sometime. I like to get them on the wing early, so I put them in a kit box real early. When they've probably not even able to fly yet, they can just flap their wings real hard, and they can get to from the ground to the top of the kit box. It seems like if you take the birds away from the parents early, that they imprint on you, and they're easier to train. So I take them away when they're real young like that. And as I put them in the kit box, I wean them because I feed my breeders pellets, and I feed my flyers grain. So I have to wean them from pellets to grain, and in most cases they haven't eaten yet anyway, so they just learn to eat grain. So I wean them. I teach them what the feed can's all about. I teach them to know when I come by whistling, and when I whistle all the time while I'm feeding the youngsters, so they know that means that I'm feeding them.
Jerry, how old are your birds when you wing them?
They're probably a month old. I take them away from, this weaning part takes about 10 days. So they're probably maybe 15 days, 16 days old when I take them away from their parents, something like that. It depends on the bird. I try to do it by the bird, not necessarily by how many days it is, and put them in a kit box then.
Is it because if you leave a baby bird with its parents in longer days than 15 to 16 days, will the bird get a little bit bigger? Is that something that
No, I don't try to, I try to base the size of my birds based on the genetic part of it, and not on the feeding part of it. I don't want any birds that are small because they didn't get enough feed or something like that. I take them away from their parents primarily so that they start to depend on me and look to me, and when you take them away from their parents young like that, they kind of imprint on you, and they learn that you're the guy that with the feed can. And if you've noticed, if you do that, you can even be away from the kit boxes, and they'll come down and land. They'll come and find you, and that's primarily the reason I do it. So it's easy to handle. That they learn good habits.
Do you give them a special blend, Jerry? A special mix when
I'm weaning them?
Yeah.
No, I just use. I give them a full ration of economy mix, and in California the economy mix has some peas in it, a couple different kinds of peas, has red wheat in it, a little bit of Milo, has some popcorn and veg in it, and that's pretty well balanced.
Will that be like a 10%, 14, or 16% in the bag?
11%.
11%.
Called economy, yeah. 11% protein.
Do you use any certain types of vitamins or minerals for your young birds?
When I first put them in the kit box, the first thing that I do to them is put them on 7 days of Aromycin, and that's all I do.
Is that for paratyphoid or for
that's just to make sure
antibiotic?
That's just to make sure that that it knocks down anything that they might get from their parents, because from the time that you take them away from their parents till the time that you get them weaned and they're starting to eat real good, they're off their feed for a little while there. So it's a stressful period for them. So during that stressful period, if you put them on that Aeromycin, it knocks down anything that they might have, gives them a good chance to get started.
Getting back to the training, Jerry, as you were talking about, once you've weaned them and stuff, and then you teach them to respond to the cat, then what goes on?
Well, usually after about 10 days, then I open the kit box, and I just open the kit box door, and they learn to come in and out just through the kit box door. I never force them to fly. I always let them fly on their own. I teach them to come back into the kit box when I put the feed in there, so I shake the can and whistle, and they'll come back in the kit box. Then after about, probably 8 or 10 days of that, maybe 2 weeks of that, then I let them out. They come out of the kit box. They learn to come right out of the kit box. I'll close the kit box door and open the little door for the bobs, and I'll make sure that they're real hungry, and I'll put some feed in there, and they'll learn to go through the bobs pretty quick. So that's how they learn to get in there. And the idea essentially is to teach them to come out, fly, land, and go back in. And I put feed inside the kit box so that they know as soon as they land, if they go in, they can eat. And that way it gives me a chance with the hawks, that they don't mess around on top of the kit boxes, that they go right into the kit box quickly, so it doesn't give that Cooper hawk much of a chance to strike them.
Jerry, do you use a hoop for the young ones?
What's a hoop?
You know, the cage on the outside.
Oh, no,
You
I
don't
don't.
use that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I teach them to, I let them out when they're so young they can't hardly fly anyway.
Oh, okay.
So they can just barely get from the ground to the top of the kit box. So
Okay.
that's one of the primary reasons
Oh,
that I
okay.
do that.
Okay.
So in most cases, I don't have to worry about them flying off. I want them to.
That's pretty good.
I want them to be weaned and trained that part of it before they can really fly very much. And then as I let them out from time to time, pretty soon they'll start taking off on their own. They'll do some little sorties around the, from kit box to kit box, from so on and so on. Pretty soon a couple of them will strike out, make a circle, and come back and land. And the reason I don't force them to fly is because when they land, it's hereditary that they know how to fly, but they kind of have to learn how to land. And wherever they learn to land at first is where they'll land at. So I want them to learn to land on top of my kit box. And if you force them to fly sometimes, they'll learn to land other places, and they won't land on top of your kit boxes. So I never force them to fly until they take off on their own.
I noticed you got a flag back there, Jerry. What's the purpose of that?
That's to force them to stay up longer after they get a little older. Sometimes some kits will develop bad habits, and if you let them go up and do their bad habit and come back down, then that habit is set. So the way to break a bad habit is to force them to fly, because after they get tired, they'll naturally do the things that they're supposed to do. And if you leave that to the last thing that they do, then they learn to break the bad habit. For example, if they start to do small circles, in other words, if they corkscrew up and corkscrew down and you let them land, well, they think that's what they're supposed to do. But if you make them fly, make them stay up in the air, that corkscrewing up and corkscrewing down takes a lot of energy. Pretty soon they get tired, they'll come down to a nice height, and they'll start doing the figure eights. And that's the last thing that you want to leave in their mind before they land, so
That's
they know that
interesting.
they're doing right.
It's real good, Jerry. How long do you put up with juvenile delinquents?
Not very long. If a bird doesn't kit or doesn't do right as a youngster, there's the chances of it developing into one that does do right isn't very good. So maybe I'll let them go 2 or 3 weeks. I'll catch them and see if there's anything physically wrong with them. If there's nothing physically wrong with them, I'll kill them.
When's the best time to fly Birmingham?
Early in the morning.
Early in
That's
the
the
morning.
only time to fly birdie hen. In California and in most areas, you want to fly early in the morning because the air is still. If you fly in the afternoon, usually the day is heated up and the air starts to rise. And sometimes it creates a breeze. And you don't want to train young birds in a breeze. They begin to turn on one wing, only going one way, and sometimes they'll learn to swoop like that. So you want to fly in the morning if you can. You're better, in my opinion, you're better off not to fly at all if you have to fly them in the afternoon.
Do you fly young birds only once, Jerry, or you can fly
Once a
them
day?
Once a day or
Yeah, I
twice
only
a day?
fly them once a day.
Once they come into the road, Jerry, do you fly them every day, weather permitting, or are you giving them a day's rest?
No, I only fly my birds on 3 days a week. I work 10 hours a day, 40 hours a week. That's Monday through Thursday, and Friday, Saturday, and Sundays are the days that I fly my birds. So the rest of the week they just sit in the kit box and wait for me. That's okay.
You want to answer that, Jerry? Do you train your old birds the same way?
Well, I train them as young birds that way, and my old birds, after they get old and into the role, it isn't necessary to fly them as much as you do young birds. Young birds, you want to fly them as often as you can. A lot of people fly them more than one time a day. I never do that. But I do feed them up so that they'll fly a little longer sometimes when they're young birds.
Like how long, Jerry?
I like them to be young birds to fly about 45 minutes, something an hour or under. And my old birds, I would prefer that they only fly about 30 minutes.
30 minutes, huh? And not every day, huh?
And not every day.
How much food would you give the young birds for the rations to make them fly 45 minutes?
I give the young birds all they can eat to the point that I can still handle them. I mean, I let them eat as much as they want to eat, as long as they'll go back into the kid box when I want them to. I don't want no stunted birds. I want them to. I want those birds to be fully developed. Fully feathered. I don't want to stunt their growth.
Do you feed them the same, Jerry? The same?
Oh no,
same blend?
If on the weekends I usually feed red wheat. The rest of the week I feed economy.
Is there a reason for that?
Just sharpens them up a little on the weekend. When you take the feed to just red wheat and take it down a little bit, makes their appetite a little sharper and just makes them a little more alert.
Do you use any kind of grit or
No,
Epsom salts or
I don't use any grit.
no grit at all?
No grit at all.
Have you find out why you don't like to use grit? Is there a reason?
No, I just found that it wasn't really necessary. I mean, the grit that we get here is red grit. It's supposed to be that health grit. They get it all over them and everything, and sometimes if they don't have enough feed, they'll fill up on it, and I just didn't think it was really good for them. So about 7 years ago, I quit feeding them grit, and I haven't fed them grit since.
So that's the birds won't get no minerals. Do you give any mineral supplements? Any other
I use Vitaprene.
Vitaprene?
That's a mineral supplement for them. Actually, in the grain and in the pellets, there should be enough minerals in there. And stones that they need for their craw to digest their food, they can pick up on the ground once in a while. I leave them out long enough sometimes to take a bath, and they can walk around and pick up the little stones. And you see them doing it from time to time.
Okay, that's real good, Jerry.
Which kind of birds develop a little faster for you in the air? Have you noticed over the years that a white eye or a yellow eye or orange eye or a bull eye?
Well, about 5 years ago, I quit raising the rollers that I had before and started developing a new family. And one of the things that with my new family that I wanted to be able to do is develop the birds that come in a little earlier. The Scott birds and the Pinson birds that I had didn't come in between 9 and 12 months, and I wanted them to come in just a little bit earlier. I didn't see any reason why, if a bird is supposed to be sexually full grown at 6 months, that it couldn't roll at 6 months. It's as big as it's ever going to get. It's as strong as it's ever going to get. It's sexually mature. I didn't see why there wasn't any reason at 6 or 7 months that they couldn't spin. So when I started developing the family that I have now, I selected birds that developed a little earlier than the Pinson birds did. I found that a lot of times the recessive red birds and dun birds, for some reason or other, with a nice orange eye, in some strains developed a little earlier. They developed sexually earlier, and they developed into the spin earlier. And it seems like that the sexual development and the roll are linked. If you have young birds that sexually develop, for example, if you have young cocks that start to crow, what I call chasing hens or something like that early, and the chances are that they'll develop the roll early too. And in this new family, that's what I tried to do.
Oh, it's pretty good, Jerry. What do you consider an ideal bird in the air? What do you consider an ideal kit bird, Jerry?
I like a kit bird that probably rolls between 20 and 30 feet. Naturally, he has to kit really good. I like for the spin to be nice and tight, fluid. Velocity is important, but the illusion is just as important. If he looks like he's rolling fast, then he's rolling fast. I like a bird that flies to the front of the kit. I like one that has a fast trigger so that when somebody else rolls, he pulls and goes too. I like one of those birds that you can fly day after day, and the bird always does something in the air. He's dependable. He always comes down, goes in the kit box. He always does his job. That's the kind of bird that I like.
Jerry, do you balance your 20 bird kit? Like, let me elaborate a little here. Like, you know, like 7 short ones, 7 mediums, 7 deep ones. That's 21 birds. But like, what I mean by
no, I don't do that.
You don't
I put the 20 best birds I got in the kit.
regardless of
If I've got, I would prefer to have 20, 40 footers that can roll like a bullet and
All
go
right,
back to the
Jerry.
kit. I mean, that's the goal that I'm looking for. But I certainly don't select birds in that category. I mean, I would rather have a fast, deep kit than one that's balanced in that order.
Jerry, can we get you to fly some birds in a few minutes?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Jerry, since we're on this subject here, Jerry, and it's so close in the
Anytime.
relationship here, Jerry, what do you consider a champion spinner, Jerry? What's your ideal? We talked about ideal kit birds. Your ideal spinner, Jerry.
Well, ideally, he's
Same
the
thing?
ideal kit bird.
Ideal
The only
kit bird?
thing that he might do, he might roll a little more often than the good kit bird does, and he might roll a little deeper. And certainly, if he happens to be a front flyer and kicks the kit in every time that he rolls, then certainly that would be my idea of a champion. One that can do all the things that an excellent kit bird can do, only some of them a little better than the ordinary pigeon. Now that's my idea of an ideal spinner. My idea of a champion is one that can do that and reproduce itself in the breeding pen.
Okay.
I think you find that there's a lot of champion spinners, but I don't think you find very often champions, and champions are the ones that can reproduce herself in the breeding pen. They can reproduce that
That's
good
a
pigeon or champion
champion in the
bird.
air and champion in stock. Jerry, since you mentioned that, Jerry, you know sometimes birds are not champions in the air, but they turn out to be champions in the stock class.
Well, just because there's good rollers, there's certainly no guarantee that they can produce good rollers.
That's right, Jerry.
I've seen it time and time again that you take a bird that's maybe a good kit bird and use it as a stock bird because of some necessity, and that bird turns out to be an excellent pigeon. People have to understand that the roll is elusive, and there's no guarantee that if you take 2 good spinners and mate them together that you're going to breed excellent spinners. There's more to it than that. A lot of people, I don't think, understand that the roll is a mental thing. It is not physical. It's mental, and you can't see it. You can't touch it. The only way that you can, only way that you know that they have it is to fly them and watch them spin, and you never know if they can reproduce it or not. You can enhance your chances by having a nice inbred family that will pass on that propensity, but there's still no guarantees.
Just Jerry, I keep calling you Jesse for some reason. I must be thinking of Jesse. When you select a bird for the breeding loft, are your in your requirements? Do you also pay attention to body type?
Oh, body type is extremely important. I like a medium-sized bird, a medium to small bird. I like one that has an apple-shaped body, like a short tail, a cobby bird if you have it. I like one that has a narrow chest with his wing butts stick out. I don't want his wing butts to go inside his chest where you can't see them. I like the chest, then the wing butts there. I think it shows. That when the bird, if it does roll, that it will roll with that knife blade that we all like to see. But I like one that has small feet, small features, refined feet. Refined features may be a better. I mean, I don't like big chicken legs and big thick beaks and that sort of stuff. A roller should look like a refined pigeon that stands alert, stands on his toes, and is short and cuffed.
So Jerry Higgins does look for temperament as well.
Oh yeah.
And expression.
Right.
What about the feather on that pigeon, Jerry? Do you like a wide feather,
Don't
a
like
long
a-
feather, a
don't like
long wing, or short wing?
All my rollers have to, feather-wise, all they have to have is enough feathers to fly.
Fly.
I mean, feathers, if you get them, if they start to get too wide, bird's going to start to get too strong. He becomes seldom for some reason or other. So I like the narrow feather, and I don't like a lot of feathers.
Jerry, I know you've been breeding birds for a long time, Jerry, and I know you know a lot about breeding as well as flying, Jerry. I've seen birds get too small and they seem to, they're not productive.
Well,
I mean, when they get too small, especially hens.
one of the things that we talked
Can you
about
talk
was
about
was that breeding champion. And to be a Birmingham roller, you've got to do all of these things, and included, you have to be able to reproduce yourself in the pen, and it goes just what you said, John. You can breed them too small, and what happens is usually the hens, they're only good for about a year or two, and then they go out. Something always happens. That's the reason I like a nice, medium, powerful pigeon that has a medium keel, and I don't like them too small. I like them medium to the small side of medium.
Being too small can be just as bad as being too big.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jerry. Let's stop it for now. How we doing, Jerry?
Get you near the camera over here, Jerry. He's putting up two teams. That's why they're like that.
Want to let out some more?
That should be good.
Huh?
That should be fine.
That's good right there, Jerry. We can get you closer over here, Jerry. All right, Jerry, as we're moving along, having a good time this morning. Jerry, let's talk about line breeding and inbreeding. Jerry, I've known you for a long time, and I know that you're not afraid of, you were never afraid to inbreed. But how's Jerry doing now? I mean, do you still practice that? Or what you doing now? Let's talk about that.
I'm in my 6th year of developing this new family, and in order to develop a family, you've got to be able to inbreed. And this year I'm doing a lot of inbreeding. I'm doing father to granddaughter, half brother and half sister, some of those types of mating, so I can kind of set the family. And next year, I won't have to worry about any line breeding or inbreeding. I won't even think about that. I'll just put best in and let that part of it take care of itself. But to develop a good family, you've got to narrow the gene pool down to the best birds that you have, and sometimes that requires you to mate them pretty close, and I do that. I don't think there's a problem in doing that at all, as long as you don't end up with something weird, you know, like web feet or you know,
Those are the signs, huh?
Not necessarily.
No?
I think you can get the web feet out of 2 birds that are not even related. I just don't like it. And if you are inbreeding and you do get it, I think that you probably ought to do the pair some other way next time. Not that I even have a problem using a bird that has web feet. If that's the best pigeon that I have, then I'll go ahead and use it. I'll just make sure when I select out of that bird that I make sure that I probably wouldn't select a bird like that.
Let me restate this pertaining to line breeding and inbreeding and even outcrossing. I wrote this down. Let me read it to you, Jerry. Concerning inbreeding and outcrossing and mixing different families together and maintaining pure strains. I mean, which do you prefer?
This is what I do.
And what do you practice?
I think to fly kit competition, you've got to have a closely inbred family to be successful. And then when you want to get those superstars, those outstanding rollers, then you need to outcross that family onto another inbred family. And I think that's when you get the hybrid outcrosses that are terrific spinners, but not necessarily good breeders. And
I see what you're saying.
I think you get the vigor of the hybrid by outcrossing like that, which makes them really roll hard. But whether or not they carry enough of the gene, the propensity gene, to make them spin or not, is really kind of a toss-up.
You know, Jerry, you were one of the first
like
guys that elaborated on that. How long have you had understanding in that area? What you're saying right now?
I think probably for the last 15 years.
That's pretty good.
But it took me a long time to figure it out.
So they don't necessarily have to be champions. They can just be a bird, maybe a peaked out bird from an it could be a bird that's peaked out from an inbred family, right?
Right.
And then another inbred family, if maybe the bird's peaked out, and then you put those 2 birds together, right?
Yes.
Okay,
But
and then
let me explain what I mean about an inbred family.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that you take a father and mate it back to its daughter and take a 3/4 of that cock, and that's an inbred family. That is not an inbred family. An inbred family is one that's been bred relationship-wise for over a period of years. You should have some first cousins, half brothers and half sister mating, fathers to granddaughters. Their whole relationship of that behind the family of birds is an inbred family. A 3/4 bird or a 7/8 bird, which means that you've bred a daughter back to the father, and then you've bred a daughter of that mating back to the father, is not necessarily an inbred family. That's inbred one pigeon, not necessarily family. A family should have lots of relationships behind it. And then when you do the outcross, it reinvigorates the stamina, the physical stamina, because when you inbreed a family of pigeons, one of the things that will occur is that usually the birds start to get a little smaller and the physical attributes start to deteriorate just a little bit. And once in a while, maybe every 5 or 6 years, you might want to put another bird back into that family to stimulate the physical attributes, you know, the power of the bird, physical power of the bird. But it doesn't do anything necessarily for the roll. The roll is already in that family, and because you introduce the physical power back into it, that's when you get the harder.
It just like rejuvenates the when you put the two families together. It rejuvenates.
Yeah.
Rejuvenates the line.
Yeah.
All right, Jerry. Jerry, Peter mentioned something about eye color in the beginning, but
That was a good break, wasn't it, Pete?
Yes.
I want to
Get
go,
it?
Yeah, I
wanna
got
go
it.
back and talk about that pertaining to
Well, you know, eye color.
color factor pertaining to the roll. Let's talk about the eye color.
In my old family of birds, the Pinson birds that me and Charlie raised, me and Charlie Saldana raised for years, and same way as Scott's. I always thought in the 514 birds that pearl eyes was the hot side. That the 514 birds rolled hard with the pearl eye and had the most roll and the less fly. But on the other side, there was another line of birds that we bred, was the red-headed hen birds, and in those birds, I always thought that the orange eye was the hottest side. That the orange eye had the most roll and that the pearl eye had the most fly. But, to make a long story short, I really don't think that you can tell an awful lot by eye. But one of the things that I do, just in case there is something to that, I try to balance the matings. Either I want all orange-eyed birds, or I'll have an orange-eyed bird mated to a pearl-eyed bird, but for some reason I never mate pearl-eyed birds to pearl-eyed birds. Now I like an orange-eyed bird, and this new family that I've created here, I like a nice, creamy, orange-eyed bird, and I'm always talking about a hot piece of tar dropped onto a orange popsicle. I like the black to be black and the orange to be orange, but not red, orange. Orange and lemon-colored eyes are the best eyes, but I don't like red eyes and rollers. I think when they get red eyes, it's too much like the Homer eye. They get too much strength, strength in their personality, okay, in their temperament. They're too strong mentally. I don't want birds that think for themselves. I want them to do what they're supposed to do, the way I want them to do.
All right, that's good. Color factor pertaining to roll and feather. You know, the color feather. I've heard you mention about recessive reds. I think a while back we were chewing the fat, and you were talking about that.
I think in this family of birds that, let me explain it this way. If you had on one end of the spectrum a recessive red bird, and on the other end of the spectrum a blue checker bird, and the blue checker bird would be the bird that has the fly and the stamina, and the red bird on the other end of the spectrum, a recessive red bird, is one that has the roll capabilities. What you want to do is get a balance between those two. It has to have enough fly so they can fly the time, and it has to have enough of the roll so they rolls often and good. And what I tried to do is find a balance between the wild side, which is the blue side, and the cultivated side, which is the recessive red side, and find a balance between the two. And a lot of times, if you look at my matings, you'll see that I've got a black bird mated to a red bird. Very seldom do I have red to red. On occasion I will, but be careful doing that because you get too much roll.
That's interesting.
When I mate a black to a blue, a black to a red, if I come out with a few dun colored birds, gunmetal colored birds, and a few red birds, then I think the roll is pretty good. I think the slide along the spectrum is pretty good, and I've yet to see any duns that really don't cut it up. Duns, that dun color seems to be halfway the best point in color, if you can tell it by color, of these birds. And when you get a dun one, usually they're the hard rollers.
Jerry, excuse me, Johnny. How old are these birds, Jerry?
These are 94s.
These are all 94s. I like the way I like your set standards on these birds. You say as soon as they start cooing, you expect them to be mature, and
Well,
they
I didn't see any reason if they could be, if a pigeon is physically mature at 6 months and sexually mature at 6 months and can breed and can lay eggs, why they couldn't roll. I mean, they're never going to be any bigger, they're never going to be any stronger, so why do you have to wait longer? I guess the argument might be is that they are physically grown-ups, but not mentally
Not mentally.
grown-ups.
Yeah,
But
'cause
if they develop sexually early, usually that means that mentally they've developed also. Have a little bit of a trouble sometime when they first come into the roll, but if you just watch them for a couple weeks and fly them often, or as often as you can, usually you don't have any trouble. They start rolling at 6 or 7 months, and they'll roll for, for the next 3 or 4 years, however long you fly them.
So you throw out totally what it says in the books that 18 months is a set standard for a bird to come
I think
into
that
the roll.
18-month stuff was invented by a guy that was selling birds that didn't roll. That's my opinion. I wouldn't have a pigeon that took 18 months. I
Too
wouldn't
long.
breed it if it was an individual champion. I'm not on the 2-year plan.
I like those standards.
Yeah,
That's
I-
probably something everyone should shoot for. I don't know what the majority of the people think, but that's something new that somebody will pick up off this video. Maybe they might say, wow, as soon as they start cooing, Jerry expects them to be matured and they should be doing something because the 2-year plan is,
no,
we're not
I've-
guaranteed 2 more
That's
years.
a long time. You only live so many years on the earth.
Right, and I'm not any younger.
Jerry,
So
would
I'm
you,
definitely not on the 2-year
Jerry,
plan.
since the birds are up in the air, I need to ask you this. Jerry, would you breed out of a non-spinner if it was out of a hot pair of birds?
Yes, I would.
And
If it had perfect type and its brothers and sisters rolled, I would certainly breed out of it. I wouldn't be opposed to breeding out of it at all. As I have indicated earlier, breeding 2 birds together that are great spinners is no guarantee that they're going to produce spinners. Now, to justify that, it doesn't mean that I wouldn't want to start with a spinner. I do start with spinners. But I would not be opposed to breeding to a bird that come out of a very good pair of pigeons that has produced tremendous rollers, and this one just didn't happen to be one that's fun. You don't get many of that in this family right here. You don't have to worry about them rolling. They're going to roll. It's just how good and how deep.
Jerry, for a novice, for a beginner that's going to get started in rollers, what do you recommend he do? Besides the reading, and do you recommend that he?
Well, usually what the
good
new
club?
guy,
I want you to talk about that. Get into a nice club. And
usually what
go on the
the
countryside.
Usually what the new guy in the hobby does is he gets bit by the pigeon bug, and he gets, if he's going to be a roller man and not a pigeon keeper, he's bit by the roller bug, which is really even worse than just the pigeon bug. And the first thing he does is start collecting up pigeons. If you could give somebody the best advice would be to, one, go and see as many roller flyers as they possibly can. And don't buy any pigeons. Don't buy any pigeons at all. Go see as many as you can and put it off for at least 6 months to a year. And after 6 months to a year, after you've been to some pigeon fly-offs, and after you've been to some shows, and after you saw who some of the winners are, and had enough experience to know who the people are that traditionally, not the one that maybe wins the first time that he's got into pigeons with some of those hybrids, but one of those that has won consistently across the years, those are the kinds of birds that you want to start with. And what that allows that person to do, he starts at the same level as that experienced person's birds are. And a lot of guys try to go buy $5 and $10 birds. Not that birds that cost a lot are necessarily any better. It just depends on where you get them at. But normally, what you want to try to do is buy some birds. Boy, that was a nice break too. Buy some birds that somebody has used as breeders. One of these types of people has used as breeders, and normally what you will have to do is pay a little more for them. But if this man or woman's standards are extremely high, they've got a consistent track record of being a winner, and you are buying some of their older stock birds that they are moving on from. For example, I sold 3 pair of my stock birds this year that I used to get to this point. Those people that got those birds got extremely good pigeons that have proven that they can produce the roll. Now, you don't get that opportunity very long, but if you're patient, if a new person is patient and they know what they're looking for, they can find those opportunities. And there's lots of good birds around. There's lots of people now, because the flying of the rollers is so popular. Lots of people have good pigeons. And if they look to see that those people have experience, been in the hobby for a while, and have been consistently breeding good pigeons for a number of years, then the chances are, if they pick up a couple pairs of those birds, there'll be a leg up on anybody that goes out and buys a whole bunch of these $5 and $10 birds and starts from scratch, really. They put themselves at the same level as the birds that they picked from that experienced person.
We shouldn't buy birds just because they have a fancy pedigree or something.
If they're good pigeons, what difference does it make? I mean, but you need to see, if you're buying rollers, the only reason that we raise rollers is because they spin. And you need to know that those birds that you're buying are 1, spinners, or 2, produce spinners. Now, we talked about putting 2 good spinners together may not produce good spinners, but if I was starting out, I would certainly rather take the chance, and at the very least, if they didn't produce good spinners, I could put them back in the air and fly them. So I wouldn't end up with nothing.
Mm-hmm. Jerry, how important is the pedigree to you?
The pedigree. If I were going to go buy a bird from somebody, pedigree is not important at all. The record keeping of pigeons for me is very important. I mean, I keep very good records on my birds, and I guess over the years that develops into a pedigree. But if I went and bought a bird from somebody that was a good bird that I was going to outcross on my birds, what's behind that bird is really immaterial. I'm bringing it into a new family. I'll probably use that bird for maybe 1 or 2 years, and I'm going to get rid of that bird anyway and use some of the offspring that's been flown into my family.
I've heard people mention that pedigree can be a tool, but it also can be a trap.
Well, I think it might be a tool for a new guy getting into the hobby, so that he could look back and see the roadmap of the breeder that he got his birds from, if they're good pigeons, how he bred them to get to that point. But any more than that, I wouldn't say it was worth anything. It's worth a lot to the breeder, the guy that built the family, because he can look back. And but I'm not sure it's worth anything to somebody that's starting, unless you're starting with a whole bunch of birds from that family and you need to know the relationship.
Okay,
Jerry, who are some rippable breeders around this area?
Well, I think
Who's
that
really helping out another man starting off in this fancy.
boy, I tell you,
Who really wants to go out to give and show and help a new guy, Johnny come lately, show him the ropes, give him some good stock?
I wouldn't trust anybody.
like you said, you got to go out.
I would only trust myself.
There's no shortcuts on Jerry.
There just isn't any short. There's lots of good pigeon. There's lots of, I think, good pigeon fanciers around. The CPRC is a good club and has a lot of honorable people in it, I think. The Roller Association the San Diego Spinners, the Ventura Roller Club. There's lots of clubs in it, and that have a lot of reputable people in it. But I think what you want to do is not take somebody's word for it. What you want to do is
Investigate for yourself.
Is investigate for yourself.
That's right.
And when you buy those pigeons, then you'll have confidence in them, that you know that they are what you think they are. You'll have confidence.
Very good, Jerry. Good stuff. Jerry, I want to ask you the old Mohican question. What are the three best kits that you've seen to date? There's three favorite ones. It could be up front. It could be time pass. Or...
Well, I remember a kit that was flown a long time ago by. Let's see if I can think of the guy's name. Abel Murillo flew a kit of birds, half Pinson birds and half Hilton birds. That were terrific spinners. Most of them were blacks or dark checkers. That was really a good kit. Had 20 birds in it. Flew at a medium height of maybe 400 or 500 feet. Kitted pretty good. They didn't kit real great, but they had a lot of deep spinners in it. Maybe 5 or 6 40-footers, and the rest of them were all 15 to 25-foot rollers. That was an extremely good kit that I can always remember. Joe Bauer flew a couple kits that I remember, and these were Hilton birds. These were terrific pigeons. They broke together. They kitted well. They had lots of velocity in the spin. They were 25-footers. Every once in a while you get one that was a little deeper. Mostly they were the same depth, high velocity, good kit birds that broke together. And if you've ever seen a kit break together, then you can never go back. I mean, the individual bird and talking about raising individual spinners and that sort of stuff, if you've ever flown or seen a kit like those kits, then that will be what you want to strive for from now on. I think that about 1993, when I flew in the World Cup, I flew an excellent kit. I had some extremely deep birds on that one. It is as good a kit as I've flown. I started the year out with one of the best holdover kits that I ever had, and I built on it. Had several birds in there that were between 40 and 60 foot that could go right back to the kit. I didn't do well that day. I have a big tree in my front yard. I rolled a bird down into that tree, and you've only got 10 seconds to get that bird out, so it didn't get out, but it was a very good kit.
I'd like to ask one question. The kit that Joe Bowers flew, what type of birds were those? What family?
They were
Hilton.
They were Hilton birds. He had a cock that was bred, that Hilton had bred down from a Smith cock.
113.
Yeah. And he had a hen that was inbred Hilton's Red family.
7 blood?
I don't know.
7.
505 or whatever it was, something like that. Anyway, that's what, and most of those birds came from that one pair of pigeons.
Yeah.
They were pretty good birds. They could reproduce their birds, reproduce themselves. The only drawback that they had, they were late coming into the roll, 12 to 16 months.
But once they came in, they came in.
That's what you're trying to accomplish a lot faster. Get away from that two-year plan.
And that's what happened. That's what happened to Joe. In this area, if you lose some of those birds, then you've got 12 to 16 months to wait until you come back in it. Now Joe flew that same kit. He was pretty lucky and he was really cautious with it. He flew that same kit for 3 years.
I remember.
And it was the same kit, and it was it waxed us for 3 years in a row. I was glad when he put some of those up for breeders and let some other guys have some. But that was a terrific kit. And it has a lot to do, not necessarily with the birds, but Joe was an excellent trainer. Had a good operation, a good way set up to do it, so a lot of the credit goes to him, not just to the birds, too.
His wife is a tremendous flyer,
Yeah,
too.
she was a good flyer, too. That's right.
Jerry, I know
Fast,
I know
quiet.
you've traveled the land probably more than
Fast.
anybody. And I know you've seen countless kits, but Jerry, could you give me 3